The lighthouse keeper of Marrow Point received a letter every Tuesday, and every Tuesday, the letter was in his own handwriting. His name was Elias Thorn, and he had lived alone on that jagged spit of rock off the Nova Scotia coast for 11 years. No family. No visitors. Just the supply boat that came twice a month, the gulls that screamed at the fog, and the great rotating light that he tended like a priest tends a flame. He liked it that way. He had come to Marrow Point to be forgotten, and the world had obliged. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday in October. It came with the supply boat, tucked between a sack of flour and a crate of lamp oil. No stamp. No return address. Just his name on the envelope, written in a cramped, slanted hand he recognized instantly, because it was his. Inside was a single sentence. Don't light the lamp on the last night of the month. Elias laughed at first. He assumed one of the boatmen was playing a joke, maybe copying his handwriting from a supply order. He crumpled the letter and threw it in the stove. That night, he lit the lamp as always, and the beam swept across the black water like a blade, and nothing happened at all. The second letter came the following Tuesday. Same handwriting. Same lack of postage. But this one was longer and it knew things. It knew that his left knee ached before storms. It knew that he kept a photograph of a woman named Clara in the back of his logbook, and that he hadn't been able to look at it in 3 years. It knew that on the previous Thursday, he had stood at the top of the tower gallery for a long time, gripping the railing, doing arithmetic in his head about the height and the rocks below. The letter ended the same way. Don't light the lamp on the last night of the month. Please. This time listen. This time. Elias read those 2 words over and over by the stove light. This time. As if there had been other times. As if he were failing some test on a loop he couldn't see. He asked the boatman about the letters when they came with the next delivery. Both men swore they hadn't brought any mail. He watched them load his envelope of outgoing reports, watched them cast off, and then he searched the entire lighthouse from the oil room to the lantern gallery, looking for some evidence of an intruder. He found nothing. Only his own boot prints in the dust of the upper stairs. Only his own coffee cup in the basin. Only his own face in the small cracked mirror, looking older than he remembered agreeing to become. The third letter was waiting for him inside the lighthouse, on his own desk, weighted down by his own brass compass. And that was impossible, because the door had been bolted from the inside all night. This letter was different. It was pages long and it was frightened. The handwriting deteriorated as it went, the way his own writing did when his hands were cold or when he'd been drinking, and it told a story. It said that on the last night of October, a ship would appear off Marrow Point in the fog. It said the ship would be the Caraway, a fishing trawler out of Lunenburg, and that her navigation would be failing, and that she would be searching for the light. It said, "You will want to save them. That is the trap. The light does not guide them home, Elias. The light is what wrecks them. I have watched it happen more times than I can count. The beam hits the fog and bends. It shows them safe water where there is stone. 19 souls, Elias. Every time you light that lamp, 19 souls, and Clara's brother is one of them." Elias sat down hard on the floor of the watchroom. Clara's brother. Danny. He hadn't spoken to Danny since the funeral. Since Danny had stood in the rain outside the church and told Elias quietly, without cruelty, which somehow made it worse, that Clara would still be alive if Elias had been home instead of working the coast. Danny fished out of Lunenburg. Elias had spent 11 years on this rock partly so he would never have to see that man's face again. The letter's final page held only 3 lines. You don't believe me. You never believe me. So on the last morning, look in the tide pool below the East Rocks and you'll believe. Elias didn't sleep for 2 days. He told himself it was madness, isolation sickness, the thing that happened to keepers who stayed too long. There were stories about that. Men who talked to the light. Men who wrote letters to themselves and forgot writing them. That was the sane explanation, and he clung to it like a spar. He had simply been writing these letters in some fugue state, in the dark hollow hours, and mailing them to himself through pure delusion. It was frightening, but it was human. Fit inside the world. On the morning of October 31st, he walked down to the East Rocks, mostly to prove the letter wrong. The tide pool was there, as it always was, a bowl of trapped seawater the size of a bathtub. And lying in it, pale and swollen and unmistakable, was a ship's life ring. The paint was blistered and salt-eaten, but the name was legible. Caraway. And it could not have been there long because he had walked those rocks 4 days earlier, and it could not have come from the sea, because no ship named Caraway had wrecked in these waters. He checked. He had 11 years of wreck registries in his logbook cabinet, and there was no Caraway lost off Marrow Point. Not ever. Not yet. That evening the fog came in early, thick and white and absolute, the kind of fog that erased the horizon and made the whole world into a small gray room. Elias climbed the tower stairs at dusk, the way he had climbed them nearly 4,000 times, and stood before the great lamp with a lit match trembling in his hand. Everything in him screamed to light it. 11 years of duty. The keeper's one commandment. The light does not go dark. If a ship was out there and the lamp stayed cold, and she went onto the rocks in the blackness, that would be his doing, plainly and forever. But if the letters were true, then the light itself was the killer, and his faithfulness was the murder weapon, and he had already killed those 19 people some uncountable number of times. In some loop he could feel now at the edges of his mind like a word he couldn't quite remember. He heard it then through the fog. A ship's horn. Distant searching off to the northeast. 2 long blasts. A vessel lost in fog, begging for a landmark. Elias blew out the match. What followed was the longest night of his life. He stood in the dark lantern room while the horn called and called, closer, then farther, then closer again, and he did nothing, and doing nothing felt like drowning. At one point he broke, sobbing, and struck another match, and got as far as the lamp wick before he saw it. Through the fog, for just a moment, the beam of his own light sweeping the water. His light. Shining. While the lamp beside him sat cold and dark and unlit. The lighthouse was casting a beam he was not making. He watched, frozen, as that phantom beam swung across the fog, and he saw how it bent, exactly as the letter said, curving like light through flawed glass, painting a bright safe channel directly across the ledge rocks that had torn open a dozen hulls over the centuries. The light of Marrow Point had never been guiding ships at all. Something in the fog, something old, something patient, had been wearing his light like a mask, using his faithfulness, his duty, his every dutiful match as bait. Every keeper before him. Every wreck in those registries. The lighthouse hadn't failed those ships. The lighthouse had hunted them. Elias did the only thing left. He took his axe to the lamp, to the great Fresnel lens, to the mirrors, and he smashed the heart of the light into glittering ruin, and as the last mirror broke, the phantom beam outside guttered like a candle and died. The fog stood silent. The horn of the Caraway sounded once more, far off now, moving away, safe in honest darkness, and then it was gone. They dismissed him, of course. Destruction of government property. The official report said keeper's madness, and Elias never argued. He moved to Lunenburg of all places. And one gray morning on the harbor, a fisherman with Clara's eyes stopped dead in front of him and said, "Thorn? Elias Thorn." And Elias braced for hatred, but Danny only looked at him for a long time and finally said, "We nearly died off Marrow Point last Halloween. Fog like a wall. And the strangest thing, the light was out. If we'd had a light to steer by, we'd have run straight up on the ledges chasing it. The dark is what saved us." He shook his head. Whoever let that lamp go out, God bless him. Elias never told him. Some debts you repay in silence. But every year, on the last Tuesday of October, Elias sits down and writes a letter in his cramped, slanted hand. He writes down everything. The fog, the bending beam, the thing that wears the light. He addresses it to the keeper of Marrow Point, whoever that may someday be, and he walks to the cliff above the sea, and he lets the wind take it. He doesn't know how the letters travel. He doesn't know how they arrive years early, or years late, or in whose Tuesday they land. He only knows that once, when he needed it most, a frightened man with his handwriting reached backward through the dark and saved him. It's his turn now. It always was. The handwriting was never a mystery, you see. It was a promise, passed keeper to keeper down a chain of Tuesdays, every man who ever broke the light warning the next one, in the only hand a stubborn keeper would ever trust. His own.